Welcome to Escaping the Rogue Provider Trap. Well, if you're watching this, there's a strong chance you're already doing the work. You're providing supported housing under the exempt accommodation rules. You might be part of a CIC, a charity, a housing association, or another voluntary or faith-based organisation. You care about the people you house. You offer support services. You believe in the value of this model when it's done right. But you also know something else, something most people on the outside don't fully grasp. The sector is under attack. Newspapers, MPs, regulators, they're all circling. Rogue provider headlines, shocking photos of poor accommodation, reports of fraud, exploitation, untrained staff. And yes, some of it's true. There are bad actors in the system. But what's less reported is this. Good providers are being caught in the crossfire. Even ethical, committed organisations who are housing the most vulnerable people in society are finding themselves under audit, facing clawback, facing accusations. Why? Because in this climate, it's no longer enough to mean well. You need to prove that what you do is legal, ethical, compliant, and effective every single day. So this session isn't about avoiding that dreaded label, rogue provider. It's something far more powerful. It's about proving that your service is irreplaceable. Because if you can show that your housing is safe, your support is structured, and your governance is watertight, if you can demonstrate outcomes, show impact, and engage residents meaningfully, if you can position yourself not just as a provider, but as a partner to your local authority, then you become more than compliant. You become indispensable. And that's what we're going to walk through today. We'll look at the systems and signs local authorities use to assess risk, the difference between hardware, software and governance, what the national standards expectations are really asking of you, and how to document your support in ways that inspire trust, not suspicion. Because the reality is this, when things go wrong in this sector, they go wrong fast. But when things go right, when you get this right, you don't just avoid trouble, you lead the field. Let's dive in. So let's begin by confronting the elephant in the room, the phrase we've all heard and all dread, rogue provider. It's a label that's being used more and more by councils, journalists, MPs, and even members of the public. But here's what makes it so dangerous. The term rogue provider isn't defined anywhere in law. It's not a formal regulatory status. It's not a conviction or finding of fact. It's a narrative, a shorthand that implies a provider is unsafe, untrustworthy, or even exploitative, often with no due process. And once that narrative sticks, it's incredibly hard to shake. So how does someone, even a good provider, get caught in that trap? It usually starts small, a missed inspection, a property without updated gas or fire certificates, a vague support log that says checked in with resident and nothing else, a tenant complaint, even if it's unfair. Suddenly, the local authority starts looking more closely. They send a compliance questionnaire, they reduce the rent level, they audit the files, and the tone changes. What once felt like a partnership starts to feel like a prosecution. And here's the key insight. It's not always bad intent that triggers this, it's weak systems. In other words, it's not enough that you know what support you've provided. If it isn't documented clearly, regularly, and in line with expectations, it's as if it never happened. Local authorities are no longer willing to just take your word for it. They want structured support plans, evidence of engagement, measurable outcomes, staff training logs, safeguarding protocols, and clear governance arrangements. All of that is now part of the burden of proof on you as a provider. So the big shift, the shift that separates those who survive from those who stumble, is this. You move from being a service provider to being an evidence provider. And that's the key to avoiding the rogue trap. Not just saying we do support, but being able to show here's who we supported, when, how, and with what result. And here's the file to prove it. So again, we come back to that powerful idea. Don't just prove you're not rogue, prove that you're irreplaceable. Because when you become the provider that delivers outcomes, has systems, and earns trust, the risk of being labelled rogue disappears, and the opportunity to become a valued partner begins. Next, let's take a look at what that looks like in practice, starting with your housing stock. Pillar 1, what I call the hardware or the housing. When councils or regulators assess your service, the first thing they see, often before they speak to a single tenant, is your housing. And housing quality matters, not just for compliance, but for credibility. I call this the hardware of your service, the bricks and mortar side, the part that's visible, measurable, and often leaves a lasting first impression. So let's be clear. If your housing looks unsafe, overcrowded or unclean, it doesn't matter how good your support is, perception sets the tone. That's why the first pillar in avoiding the rogue provider trap is getting your hardware right. There are 3 key areas to focus on. 1. Safe, clean, legally compliant homes. Is your gas safety certificate up to date? Are fire alarms installed and tested? Do you have fire doors where needed? Are the kitchens hygienic? Are shared areas maintained? If you spot inspection happen tomorrow, would you feel confident or worried? You can't afford to be surprised. So here's a tip. Conduct your own monthly mini audits. Fix things before they become complaints. 2. Appropriate location. This is often overlooked but can be a red flag. Local authorities are now considering whether properties are in over-concentrated areas, unsafe neighbourhoods, isolated from services. If your tenants are miles from a GP, pharmacy or bus route, that's a red flag. Think about your location like a social worker. Does this setting help someone recover and move on? Here's a tip. Map the services around your property and keep it on file. 3. Responsive housing management. It's more about doing than just doing repairs. It's about proving you're doing them. Do you log all tenant maintenance requests? Do you have a repairs SLA? Do you track complaints and resolutions? When housing benefit auditors or council housing officers ask, they want to see maintenance logs, tenancy agreements, property inspection records. Not because they don't believe you, but because belief isn't enough anymore. So here's a tip. Create a digital or paper housing folder for each property with all documentation in one place. The takeaway here is simple. Your housing is your shop front. If it's not clean, legal, safe and well documented, your service starts on the back foot. But if it's visibly well run, with records in place and repairs being logged and resolved, you're already halfway to being seen as credible. And remember, councils want partners, not problems. When they see that your hardware is solid, they start to trust your software too. And that's where we're heading next, to the second pillar the support you provide. Well, if the hardware is the house, then the software is what happens inside. This is the beating heart of supported exempt accommodation, the support you offer to your residents. And here's the catch. This is also where most providers get caught out, because support is one of the most poorly evidenced, vaguely defined, and heavily scrutinised elements of this whole model. It's no longer enough to say we check in with residents. It's no longer enough to say we're always available if they need us. The expectation now is structured, tailored, person-centred support, clearly planned, regularly delivered, and visibly documented. Let's break that down. 1. Support must be more than de minimis. That phrase, more than de minimis, appears in almost every tribunal and audit case. It means that the support you provide must be regular, meaningful, clearly linked to the residents' needs. You can't rely on generalised support like help with benefits or emotional reassurance. You need to show what support you provided, when and why. Here's an example. On Monday, support staff met with resident A to review their ESA appeal and help submit additional evidence. Outcome: ESA awarded 2 weeks later. Number 2, tailored support plans and logs. Every resident should have a documented plan, not just a one-pager or a copied template, but a support plan that identifies their goals, lists the risks and needs, specifies what you will do and how often. Then you track it. Weekly or daily logs that link back to the plan, regular reviews, progress notes. It's not just about the volume of entries, it's about quality and relevance. Here's a tip. Avoid generic phrases. Instead of provided reassurance, say, talk through resident B's concerns about their upcoming court date, referred to advocacy team for legal support. Number 3, use the STAR framework to demonstrate outcomes. One of the strongest tools you can use is the Outcome STAR model, a co-produced, goal-based tool widely accepted by commissioners. Residents score themselves across areas like mental health, social skills, managing tenancy, meaningful use of time. You use it at the start of the placement, during reviews, and at move on. And the progression becomes visible, auditable, trustworthy. It shows that your support makes a difference. That's the difference between a landlord with extras and a provider of supported accommodation. Number 4, move on planning and co-production. You need to show trajectory. Supported accommodation is meant to be transitional. Councils want to see that you're helping people move on, even if they're not ready yet. Show the steps. Is there a plan? Are residents involved in shaping it? Have they developed tenancy skills, budgeting, or routines? Co-production is a buzzword, yes, but it's also powerful. A support plan signed by the resident with their own goals written with their own words goes a long way with auditors. So here's the bottom line. You're not just offering support, you're offering a documented journey of change. And when you do that well, when you build that evidence, you don't just comply, you lead. Now we turn to the third pillar, and arguably the one that separates survivors from leaders in this sector. Governance. I know the word doesn't exactly quicken the pulse, does it? But if you've ever been through an audit, an enforcement process, or a sudden clawback, you know this truth. Your governance is your defence. It's what keeps your service standing when the questions start flying. So let's define it in plain English. Governance is how you run your organisation, not just what you say you do, but how you make decisions, manage risks, train your staff and assure quality. In the supported exempt accommodation context, strong governance means predictable systems, clear policies and visible oversight. Here are the key components. Number 1, documented internal policies and procedures. The National Statement of Expectations, and indeed the new Supported Oversight Act, will call for providers to have written and accessible policies covering safeguarding, complaints, confidentiality, data protection. But don't just tick the box. Make sure policies are reviewed annually, staff have signed to confirm understanding, and you can show training logs and inductions. If your policies only exist as a dusty binder or a download no one reads, they're a liability. Here's a tip. Store all policies in a shared folder or a cloud-based staff portal with read confirmations tagged. Number 2, risk management and safeguarding protocols. Regulators want to see how you keep people safe, not just in theory, but in practice. Do you have a safeguarding lead, a process for logging and escalating concerns, incident records, partnerships with adult social care or police? And are these systems used consistently across all properties? One safeguarding failure can end an entire service, not because of the incident, but because of the absence of procedural integrity. 3, staff training and supervision. Who supports your support staff? Do you provide structured training on mental health, trauma, domestic abuse or benefits? Do you conduct regular supervisions and reflective practice? Do you hold incident debriefs or learning reviews? And more importantly, do you log all of this? Here's a tip. Create a staff passport that travels with each worker, showing completed training, performance reviews, and areas for development. Fourthly, internal audits and resident engagement. Governance isn't just top-down, it must also listen. This means resident feedback forms, anonymous surveys, monthly housing meetings, action logs to show how complaints are responded to. Equally important, internal audits. Are you checking your own files? Are support logs being reviewed for quality? Are maintenance SLAs being met? Governance isn't what you do when things go wrong, it's what you do to prevent things going wrong. As a final thought, the providers that survive in this climate and thrive have systems, not stress. Systems that can be shown to any auditor, any housing officer, any commissioner, and hold up to the question, can we trust this organisation with public money and vulnerable lives? Whether your answer is yes, here's how we know. You're not just avoiding the rogue trap, you're becoming the benchmark. So we've talked about your hardware, the housing, and we've talked about your software, the support, and we've talked about governance, your internal systems. But now comes the piece that ties it all together, the part that transforms your compliance into credibility and your records into reputation. It's what I call the story of change. Because in supported exempt accommodation, it's not enough to provide a clean property. It's not enough to deliver support sessions or file logs. It's not even enough to have policies and staff training in place. At the end of the day, commissioners, regulators and councils want to know, what difference did you make? How has this resident's life changed from the moment they entered your service to the moment they moved on or stabilised or progressed? And how do you prove it? Number 1, combine data and storytelling. Think of your evidence in two streams. Stream 1, hard data. Number of residents moved on to independent living. Improvement in STAR outcomes. Attendance at support sessions. Reduction in antisocial behaviour or complaints. Stream 2, human story. Case studies, quotes from residents, reflections from support staff. The key is to bring these two together. Not just resident X improved their budgeting, but resident X went from weekly overspending and missed rent to managing a £40 a week budget independently, supported by weekly sessions and a co-produced money plan. Number 2, use anonymised case studies. Case studies are gold, but they must be anonymised to protect identity, specific about the journey, and linked to support actions. Councils love these, but they hate fluff. No vague, he turned his life around stories. Show the before, the interventions, and the after. Use charts if needed, or keep it in short narrative form. Example, Resident B entered our service with a history of rough sleeping and psychosis. After 6 months of structured tenancy support, psychiatric referral and a daily check-in plan, they stabilised on medication, joined a gardening group and began applying for social housing. Number 3, elevate the resident's voice. Too often, residents are treated like recipients, not partners. But resident engagement is now a regulatory expectation. How do you include their voice? Involve them in their own support planning. Use direct quotes in reviews. Invite feedback at exit interviews. Include resident stories in your quarterly report to the council. You're not just providing a service, you're hosting a journey. And your role is to document that journey with dignity, evidence and intention. So here's a final thought. If you've followed all the steps we've covered so far, you've cleaned your data, structured your systems and strengthened your governance. This final step gives it all meaning, because stories build trust, and in this sector, trust is capital. So don't just show what you've done, show what changed. Because when you become known not just as a provider, but as a place where change happens, then you're not just avoiding the rogue trap, you're building a service no commissioner wants to lose. So let's bring this all together, because by now you've seen the mechanics of what it takes to stay compliant, stay credible and stay in business. But I want to close with something deeper, because at the heart of everything we've talked about today is one powerful, counterintuitive truth. Most providers, especially ethical ones, spend all their time trying to prove they're not rogue. They prepare files defensively. They wait for the next compliance check. They respond to audits, reviews, clawback threats, always reacting, always firefighting. But that's not a strategy. That's not how you lead. And it's certainly not how you thrive in the future of supported housing. So here's your aha moment, the big shift in mindset I want to leave you with in this presentation. Don't just prove you're not rogue, prove you're irreplaceable, because that's what will actually protect your organisation. Not dodging bullet points on a checklist, but becoming so clearly, visibly valuable to your residents, your commissioners, your partners, that they want to keep you around. Let me show you what this looks like. You're irreplaceable when your housing is clean, safe, legal, and already audit ready. Your support is personal, planned, and makes measurable impact. Your staff are trained, your policies are active, your safeguarding is airtight, your governance doesn't panic when the inbox pings, it's already got the evidence ready. Your stories of change are so compelling that regulators use them to explain what good looks like. At this point, you're not defending your funding, you're justifying your leadership. What this means practically, it means shifting from compliance anxiety to confidence systems. It means auditing yourself before the council does, tracking outcomes before anyone asks, updating policies before there's an incident, training staff before it's mandatory, and it means owning your narrative. Because if you let someone else write your story, a housing officer, a counsellor, a news outlet, they might reach for the easiest label, rogue. But when you write your own story with proof, structure, outcomes and dignity, they won't just say they're not rogue. They'll say, we need more providers like them. Here's a final thought then. Supported housing is under pressure. But pressure reveals leaders. Don't just aim to stay on the right side of the line. Aim to redefine the standard. Because when you're irreplaceable, you're not at risk. You're at the centre of the solution.